I had started at Purdue a few days before our classes with an orientation, and I remember skipping a couple of the the things that didn't interest me in the orientation to go on a bike ride with some of the club members. So even before they had done their call out in the year. And it was so funny because I had this really nice shiny bike, and I had no idea what I was doing on it. So my learning curve was as steep as it could have been.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Talking Bikes. Today on the series, I'm joined with Jess Bunchek,
Yeah.
a collegiate cycling alumni and is now a plant scientist at the Kennedy Center down in Florida, and will be traveling down to Antarctica for a winter campaign running a greenhouse down there. So thank you, Jess, for hopping on today. Really appreciate it. And what kind of how I started most of these. How'd you end up in cycling? And we're going to go all the way back to when you were a kid. Like, do you remember like your first time riding a bike? Like, what was of that general experience?
I do. Yeah, actually, it's funny that I do. And how I got into cycling, I didn't have any friends or family who were involved with the sport, but I realized as a kid that we as a family would go on recreational rides around our town, and I definitely took it a little bit more seriously mentally than I think the rest of my family. And I loved the feeling of getting to go around the corners and just the feeling of the wind moving around me, so the speed factor. And but I really wasn't sure what to do with that. And so once I finally got into high school, I realized that it was something that I wanted to give a shot as a sport. And unfortunately, with growing up where I did, we didn't have cycling as a sport in our school system, and we also really didn't have it much within our own community. So it really was just trying to find my own way to make it happen. I think that growing up with having watched a lot, of course, the Tour de France, like that was my summer. And so I would watch, wake up in the morning each summer and start off the day with watching the stage and then go ride my bike outside, kind of dreaming about about riding for real. So I think that dream of really wanting to go fast and being able to power my own way to get there, it's not only been there since the very beginning, but also it even does intertwine its way into my career goals too.
And then when you got to Purdue for undergrad, was it something that you thought prior to getting into campus as a freshman that you were going to be a part of the cycling team at Purdue, or is it more of something that you stumbled into once you got to Purdue?
No, it was like the thing I wanted to get into when I went to college. I had done all of my research, found out there's collegiate cycling, so it wasn't just like a club of people, but you could really get into the sport. And so I was fortunate enough to get hired on by a local bike shop my latter 2 years of high school. So this was a way where I could actually learn about the bikes, learn about mechanics, and then also work to save up money to actually get my own bike so that I would be ready with some equipment by the time I got to campus. And then I had started at Purdue a few days before our classes with an orientation, and I remember skipping a couple of the things that didn't interest me in the orientation to go on a bike ride with some of the club members. So even before they had done their call out in the year. And it was so funny because I had this really nice shiny bike, and I had no idea what I was doing on it. So my learning curve was as steep as it could have been.
What was your did you get along with the team at Purdue? Was it kind of like just like, I mean, cyclists now, I mean, we're a quirky bunch of people. So was it just like a good mesh of personalities and just love and interest in the bike, and then getting to then go race your bike with other college students later on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that really did help was that I was a girl. And so being at a school that had a club set up, of course, there was an incredibly high ratio of the male members versus the female members. And so the other members were incredibly excited to have someone who was coming in as a freshman. And, I was really wanting to just go on as many rides as I could. And because, I was new and I was a girl, they were like, oh, we got to try and keep her because we don't have like that many girls. If you don't have any girls, you won't get any other girls in your group. So that was from the very beginning, they were really supportive. And, once I got to the spring, when I started doing road racing, then, again, I had never done it before. And so it was wonderful because there were a lot of guys who were racing in the A category who could help to coach me through it. And one of those is Joey Uliano, who's at the University of Arizona. And so he was the first person that came to mind of like the big helper that I had in the club to mentor me. He got me comfortable with riding really close behind other riders, so getting close to having our wheels near each other and pace lining. So they all did such a great job of trying to build up my skill level, and they were really encouraging along the entire way.
Very cool. Is there any fond memories from that first set when you raced at Purdue before we kind of jump ahead and talk about what you did at Penn State?
My favorite memory was each year where we went to Arkansas for spring break. And Arkansas is like not the place that comes to mind first whenever you could picture a collegiate spring break, maybe even from the cycling standpoint, but it was a beautiful place to ride because there weren't that many people. There were no stoplights. You had great mountain roads, and the locals were incredibly friendly towards us. And it wasn't that expensive of a spring break place. So it was like the perfect college thing. But we did that as a tradition for almost 9 years as a club. And so it was wonderful to look forward to that each and every year. And we got a lot of great training in, and we could usually one or both of those weeks with collegiate racing at one of the schools, depending on how the schedule was set up that year. But it was so important for us to also have that time of spending, recreation time off the bike, whether that was, going on the hikes nearby or just enjoying being away from campus. That's where I think where my fondest memories came from.
Very cool. And then when I think most like college students think that they're like when they of a sport that they were in kind of ends once they graduate undergrad. But you continued that your cycling career racing in college when you went to Penn State. So was that something that you thought about as you were like, okay, I'm going to go and get my master's degree and work on my or another degree? Did you think like, oh, like, was it again, like going into Purdue, like I'm going to be on the Penn State cycling team? Or was it like, I get there and realize, oh, I still can race my bike and I can race for Penn State?
It was just like Purdue, when I was looking for places to do my master's, I was not only thinking about what would it be like to live in this place and what kind of program am I wanting and what kind of lab support and research funding would I be able to have, but also what was the cycling dynamic in that town, and also what kind of team did the college have to support that. And if you want to have really wonderful cycling in the East, Pennsylvania is a beautiful place to do that. And the Penn State team is a much larger team than the Purdue one, but has a little bit of a different feel to it just because it is, has a different culture, different size, different collegiate conference that it's racing in. But it was something that I knew I was really wanting to keep as a part of my life once I went to grad school, mostly because I knew I had built up such a wonderful group of friends who, you're saying like, we're a quirky bunch. They understand those quirks that I had. And so same thing, as soon as I went to Penn State, that was the one or only organization that I really got involved with as a grad student. And I found that I, understandably was not able to race as much as I had really hoped because grad school is just a demanding thing on students. But I found that I built incredible friendships through this organization. And that was with a group of people that, like with Purdue, they were so supportive of me, and I tried to be as supportive as I could of them, but especially with the fact that I couldn't be on the bike as much, they didn't think anything less of my participation in the club, that I was still a member of the unit and I could still support even if I couldn't be at every single race weekend or if I had to take an entire season off. And that is still true today. It's wonderful that I can still call these individuals friends and feel their support all the way back from the US even.
Fantastic. That's so cool. And now what, like after moving on from Penn State and now you're in your career, what is your relationship with the bike? Do you still find it as a way that like it's something that you can get out and enjoy and go for a ride, or maybe use it as a stress reliever? Kind of like how do you see the bike now? But
my relationship has definitely gotten more complicated with it since moving to Florida. mostly because Florida as a state has the highest cyclist fatality rate of any of the US states, and it's actually significantly higher than even any of the other states. And once I got down there in the Space Coast, so the eastern kind of central part of Florida, I could definitely see that the infrastructure and the culture of where I live was pretty in tune with that. In fact, once I even got to where I was working, they had said that it was not possible to commute to and from the Space Center on bike because there had been some incidents in the last decade or so where a couple employees had actually been hit during their commute and unfortunately didn't survive that. So it was a very sobering reality once I first got down there that it wasn't necessarily the safest thing to be doing. And of course, all cyclists, no matter where they're at, including outside the US, we take risks, whether it's of injury or potentially being hit by a car, but the risk is so high there that it just hasn't been something that I've been willing to really, take that huge risk on and continue to ride kind of like a daredevil. So especially knowing that I will likely not stay in Florida forever, I've just kind of tried to be patient about it. But the relationship really has evolved where I still try to get out kind of like a weekend warrior and, take the mountain bike out on some of the trails, which are flat and sandy, but it's better than nothing, or getting out on some short road rides where it is a little bit safer to ride. But I have really also relied and built upon all of the other off-bike activities that I had worked on through the collegiate cycling career. So with yoga or doing other, training activities like running or rock climbing, I've really been able to rely on those and think, okay, I used to do that. That was really fun. Now, how do I bring more of that into my life? And also just trying to maintain the good habits like, nutrition and the good mental health. So, cycling is not just on the bike. And so I find that I've just kind of rotated the percentages of what I'm doing within that realm. But I would, like to go and do a PhD, hopefully once I'm back from my Antarctic adventure. So of course, once I go to select a school, I'll be looking for teams, collegiate cycling teams to either do racing or like with Penn State, where I could just rely on making a solid group of friends.
Fantastic. So yeah, like since you've moved down to Florida, I mean, like your career has definitely taken off, and like the opportunities that you've been able to do and kind of where you are now being in Germany. So kind of, if you could provide like kind of some context of like just how like not very many cyclists I get to talk to are doing as cool things that like you're doing right now. So what kind of layman's terms, I tried to understand a little bit of the papers that you've been working on, but it's definitely like way over my head. So what exactly are you working on when you were in that Kennedy Center and now kind of in Germany, what you're prepping for in this upcoming year?
Sure. So my job's really unique and interesting, which makes it fun. So I work as a botanist at the Space Center, where I get to support a plant production system on the International Space Station. And that system is called Veggie. It's actually not an acronym, despite everything in the government. This is like the one project that does not have an acronym. So it's just Veggie, which is wonderful. So with Veggie, I worked to help prepare experiments in this particular system. So working with the plants, so that once we actually launch them to the space station and the astronauts start working with them, we can help work with the astronauts with the best of our knowledge based on how we think that particular plant's going to grow, and also how it may react in the system. And so we do also help to support the astronauts in that regard. And then with what I'm doing right now, it's actually, I still have my job at the Space Center, but I'm just working on this very long remote project. It's a new collaboration between NASA and the German space agency called DLR. And DLR has a greenhouse in Antarctica at the German Neumeier station. And so because the US, we currently don't have a greenhouse at any of our research facilities in Antarctica, then the project came about of, hey, we here at the Kennedy Space Center are really focused on trying to research and prepare for how to grow food for astronauts on like the surface of the moon or the surface of Mars. And DLR is also trying to do something similar, but just from more of a larger systems perspective. So how can we put what we get to do at KSC with what they do at DLR, and we merge them together and try and work towards the goal a little bit more efficiently. And so one of those ways to do so is that I am going to actually be going down to Antarctica, and I'll do about a 14-month campaign with 9 other individuals, all of whom are German, or I guess our cook is originally from France, but he's been living in Germany since longer than either you or I have been alive. So we'll kind of count him a little bit. but while I'm there, it'll be wonderful to do some research for both of the space agencies, but it'll also be the chance to grow fresh produce for our entire crew, since that is the only fresh produce that we will get for the majority of our time down there. So I have been in Germany since the middle of July, doing various types of training and getting to live and work with the crew, since we will be entirely remote and relying on each other for making sure that we all can tolerate each other and stay alive. But also we will leave then in the middle of December to go down to Antarctica, and then we'll stay there until the first quarter or so of 2022.
That's crazy. That's so exciting.
Thanks.
So what, have you found anything that from working and riding with cyclists to kind of prep you for kind of the work that you're doing now? Is there any sort of, like teamwork is one thing, but like, is there anything else that you've somewhat like picked up on that, like, man, like there's actually some similarities and some overlap between what I'm doing down here and what the chances I've had with Purdue and Penn State?
Yeah, the one characteristic that I have found more in cycling than other things and have tried to continue to apply, especially this year with how challenging it's been for everyone, is grit. Yeah, cycling, it really does encompass that. And even astronauts will talk about when they're doing their missions, it takes grit to be able to put up with all of that. And I'm finding that to be here, I'm not an astronaut, but even to be here on this campaign, I'm finding that I'm applying that same mentality. But the grit idea, I first really started to figure it out once, when you're doing those really long, hard rides and you get to that point, either just during training or racing, it's that wall that you're hitting and you're thinking like, oh, I can't do this. And how many times as cyclists are we able to push past that barrier and then think like, oh, like I actually did that, I didn't back down from that, and keep applying that mentality and going forward and pushing the boundary just a little bit farther. And it's incredible to realize that with just applying grit, how far we are really able to push ourselves. And I found that with doing cycling as an undergrad, I found that I was able to apply that with my graduate program, to really not give up with that, even when I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like this program is really just getting me down. But it was that same stubbornness and that same thing like, hey, it was like 30 some degrees and I was, climbing this mountain in someplace like Kentucky. And it's just like this, I thought like that was going to kill me and I still didn't give up. And like, that was definitely more extreme. I'm going to survive something like this. And so even with trying to get to this point with NASA and on this project, it really has been just trying to stay positive and pushing through each and every problem and realizing that, if I've been able to survive some of those other things I was able to push myself through, that I'm going to be able to push myself through this. So that's like the biggest characteristic I've really found and embraced and just continue to love.
That's fantastic. What on the kind of like the lighter side of that, what are some things that you're kind of looking forward to do down? Because not very many people get the chance to just be in Antarctica, let alone be there for a long campaign like you are. What are there some things that people have talked about that it's like some things that you like miss or stories that you want to see actually play out? Like if there's been anything have there been horror stories that you've been privileged to hear now with your time in Germany prepping for this? Like what's like kind of going through your head as you kind of plan for being down there?
Sure. Yeah, the horror story. People like keep telling me I need to watch The Thing, and I'm not. But the things I'm most excited about are just to live in such an interesting environment. So we will have the month of darkness. So we'll be able to see. As someone who loves space, I'm really excited to get to study the night sky down there, especially because the northern hemisphere can have a different sky than the southern hemisphere. So everything will be brand new. We should be able to see the southern lights, which will be just a lovely phenomenon. Maybe you get to see some wildlife like penguins, or, you know, where the Neumeier station is, it's actually only 6 kilometers from the edge of the ice. So we might be able to observe something like whales or seals. So just really getting excited about living in such an extreme environment. But of course, there will be a lot of things to miss. You know, I'm a botanist, so I love trees, and I won't be able to see, you know, trees or really anything natural and green for over a year. You know, of course, we'll have the plants in the greenhouse, but that's really it. And it's more even so of, you know, we won't have any weather apart from snow and wind. So no thunder and lightning, no rain. You know, we won't be able to hear anything like rivers running. Some of the perks I've heard from stories are that, you know, you don't have all of the traffic and, you know, the other just crazy people you're dealing with. You don't have to go grocery shopping. And if you want, you know, if politics are too crazy, you do have the ability to disconnect from all of that, since there is no there won't be any outside pressure for you to stay connected. So there are some upsides and downsides to it, but it's mostly just, you know, just trying to stay excited about everything. But I have found myself going through the motions of each day while I've been here, and it's interesting when something will catch my attention and actually stop me in my tracks, thinking I won't hear this or see this or smell this for X amount of time. And so, you know, I try and take that moment to really absorb it and store it in my memory. And it's been everything from hearing someone mowing the lawn to sitting in a restaurant. Yeah, before Germany went on its lockdown a couple of weeks ago, there were 3 of us from our crew sitting in a restaurant, and one pointed out, this is the last time we will be in a restaurant for about 17 months. And it was like, whoa, that's a little weird. So it's, but, you know, it's an adventure, and just trying to, you know, stay positive and excited about that, and realizing that everything else will be here once we get back.
For sure. What does exercise look like for those down there? So like, what's the high? Is the high, like, I mean, I'm sure you're talking like Celsius, but like Fahrenheit, like, is that somewhere around freezing? Does it get above freezing, or is it kind of just, or is it 32 a really nice day down there in the summertime, or the season that you're down there in? Is that, and then what when you do get outside, I mean, you mentioned walking to the edge of the glacier, or the, what are you going to be like utilizing, or can you ride a bike down there? I mean, is that possible?
You can, yeah. So with the weather, it can get to be warm enough in the summer. It's not going to be like warm by any means, and it's good. We don't want Antarctica to be warm, but it can be warm enough that you can walk outside for quite a while, maybe just with like jeans, or maybe like some long underwear and then jeans on top of it, and then one of our jackets. And you probably won't need any gloves during the summer. We do always have sunglasses, particular glacier sunglasses that we have to wear, because the ice is so reflective, even more so than normal sunglasses can assist us with. And then during the winter, it actually, you know, gets down to -40, which is, fun fact, the intersection point of the Fahrenheit and Celsius scale. So it's -40 no matter which one you're talking about. And it can even get colder than that. So in the last couple of years, it's gotten down to almost -60 Fahrenheit, which is it's just cold. And you don't want to spend too much time outside, but we fortunately have plenty of clothing that is rated to keep us safe in those conditions. So in terms of the exercise, you know, outside, it can be anything from just walking around and getting some fresh air. The greenhouse I will be operating is actually 400 meters from the Neumeier station. And so my exercise each day will be going back and forth between that, and sometimes having to haul things with me. And of course, if I have all of my layers on in the winter, that's a lot of weight to carry. And it is possible to ride a bike down there during the summer months. So if you have like studded tires or larger mountain bike tires or a fat bike, you can definitely bring that too. Some individuals have brought cross-country skis in the last few years, but I don't think anybody is doing that in our campaign. And running, which I really want to try. I'm a little nervous I'm going to slip and fall and hurt myself, but I really want to try and say I went for a run outside in Antarctica. But then of course, during the winter, it'll be too dangerous for us to go outside and do those things. And it'll be, of course, a little bit too dark to make it quite as fun. So there is a gym that we have inside the station, which of course has like the basic workout equipment. We do have an exercise bike, so I'm planning to bring a saddle and shoes and basically do like a college engineering rig of the machine to turn it into my personal bike to use. And then we have a space that is typically used for like playing basketball, and so we can do that for either playing games with each other or like a yoga studio. I in particular am really motivated to do things that can help with cognition, since we can see that our brains can really decline, which is not fun to know it's going to happen, but we can see that our cognition can decrease. So doing a lot of the same hand-eye coordination activities that we do for training our hand-eye coordination with cycling, those are activities that we can bring into our workout regimen. And then people in the past have they have, been like rock climbers, for example, which unfortunately we don't have that kind of space. But again, bringing in cross training from what they have recommended can be a really great way for us to try and stay fit, because particularly in this kind of environment, it's not only keeping us physically fit, but the mental and the emotional side will be absolutely vital. So fortunately, I have experience with creating things like training plans. And so that's something I'm really excited about with Neumeier, is how do I try and create a diverse and effective training plan to make sure that I can stay healthy all throughout the duration, but also stay fit enough to be able to do my job properly.
So your station, will there be another group down there with you, or is it just your crew of 8 or 9 and that's it? Or are you going to is there another group down there with you?
Yeah. Right now there's currently a group of 9 overwinterers. So they have, they're getting towards the end of their campaign. And in a normal year, there are a lot of scientists, engineers, and other folks who will fly down to the station, and they all meet in Cape Town, South Africa, and then fly from Cape Town down to the station. And you can get between like 60 and 70 individuals at the high peak into this station. But with COVID, that has not been the case. And in fact, we are not even flying to begin with. We are going by ship from the north of Germany straight down to Antarctica. So we will have a highly decreased number of individuals. In fact, it'll only be the 10 of us who are replacing those current 9 individuals, and then a minimum kind of skeleton crew to do the turnover engineering on the station, and our team logistics coordinators to make sure that we newbies can settle into the station properly. And then we'll get to March, and March is when everyone will leave, and then we're on our own. So the 10 of us will be by ourselves until hopefully towards the end of October next year. But if COVID is still going to be an issue and everyone has to come by ship again, we'll be by ourselves until the following January. So that's why they really want to make sure we like each other, because once we're by ourselves, it really is just like you and 9 other people. And even the other stations run by other countries in that area of Antarctica are still way too far away for us to hopefully ever need to meet. So if we had like an emergency and we had to travel to those stations, then the nearest station is about 1 to 2 days in like the best summer weather, but it can be up to maybe like 3 weeks if the typical winter weather. So it really is just us there, very similar to kind of being in space. And thank goodness my parents are as supportive as they are and haven't totally freaked out about this situation yet.
So what, like, in terms of the work that you're going to be down there on, what are some goals that you hope to achieve, or anything, or any hypotheses that you want to test and then see that come to hopefully fruition? Is there anything like outside of making food that's like awesome to do, but is there anything else that like you're kind of like the work that you intend to see through that time period?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of goals in this particular study for this coming year, and it's everything from trying new crops that we've been testing in Florida in this new system, And, we are also continuing some work that DLR has done as a space agency. So tracking the amount of resources needed, and the amount of time that it takes to run a facility like this. And then we also are going to be going forward with a lot of joint agency research, such as bumping up the amount of microbiology and food safety testing that we are doing. And it's wonderful that we have this particular environment to do all of these different parameters, because of course our big goal is space, but we find that when we can get a lot of well-rounded research in these kinds of areas, they can also apply to other indoor agriculture production facilities anywhere throughout the world. So we are hoping that we can get all this research and then put out some papers and go to conferences to try and spread the word on what we are doing. And then, of course, personally, each of us typically have some goals that we want to do while we are down there. So my goal is to hopefully get a lot of video and learn, how to do photography a little bit better. We have some really talented photographers in our group. So we're always interested to, making sure that we aren't just working all of the time, since we are literally living in this job. So in addition to taking time for, our physical health, it's also, learning new stuff. So in addition to like the photography or videography, I'm continuing to improve all of my language skills with German that I had learned for many years in school. And same with that, they're also wanting to really improve their English. And so it's wonderful that it'll be a huge learning experience. It'll be quite wonderful.
Fantastic. So to kind of close out, wrap up, is there anything that you would like to share to the cycling community now that you're on the face of USA Cycling and this goes live? Kind of wrapping everything, like your time racing collegiate to your relationship to how you'll find cycling to kind of keep your sanity when you're down in Antarctica, to just everything in between. Is there anything, I definitely put you on the spot on this, but is there anything outside of I think grit's a great starting point, but is there something else like that you find that is probably worth sharing and using your platform to do so right now?
Yeah, the one thing I have learned more so looking back on my time with racing collegiate than I think I realized during it is that, we each do have our own journey and our goals when it comes to racing bikes. And it can be anything like how, if I wasn't on the bike, it was more of a social aspect and really relying on just having friends who shared common interests. At the height, I was like, oh, like cycling is amazing. Like, can I eventually be good enough to be a pro? Which I gave up on that goal once I started focusing more on, my space career. But there can be a lot of pressure from, different teammates or different, just different aspects of the cycling, community to try and, just peer pressure to do things one way or another. And I think looking back on it, your experience in college and your relationship with the bike is something that is strictly yours. And each of us has a different way that we've gotten to this point with wanting to join a club or a team and either compete or not compete. And I highly encourage everyone to get out and at least try one race, especially one race in all the different disciplines. That I think that was the greatest thing about collegiate cycling, was getting the chance to try so many different things. But at the end of the day, definitely don't lose sight of why you've gotten into the sport, and why it benefits you, because that can definitely be a big shaping factor into your entire collegiate experience. And just also really cherish the time getting to, go on rides with individuals who are likely, your age, or you may have non-traditional students or older graduate students who are going to go on those rides too. But, you're all sharing the collegiate experience. Whereas once you do the, any of the other calendar seasons that aren't collegiate based, you can be racing with individuals who have well-established careers, either as cyclists or, they could be doctors, lawyers, teachers. They have other jobs and they can be much older and have different dynamics. So, definitely just take the time to love being in collegiate cycling for all that it is, but especially, for what makes it so special to you in general.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Jess. Really appreciate your time today and sharing so much on from your time racing in college to kind of your future. And I think our audience here as cyclists and will definitely learn something today from what you had to share. So so from the USA Cycling family to you, we wish you good luck in the upcoming campaign, and we will see you when you get back.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you so much.